Hello and welcome to boys.
He's a scat man. Shibidibidoo-ba-ba-da-bo. Ba-ba-da-bo.
He killed his wife. Welcome to SpongeBob, boys. It's a classic flavor. Me and Gus, the OGs, L to the OGs, and we are here with more horrible things to show you today. How are you doing, Gus?
Welcome to Game Grumps, folks. I'm doing fine.
I'm the rust one, and he's the one with
Not so grumps.
I'm kidding.
Whoa,
Don't no one
let's
click
not.
that.
Hold on a second.
That's getting bleeped. That's getting bleeped. I turn up my gain on this is crazy.
I think there's a slight delay too. I think we're fucking up all over the place.
Are we? I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, as long as there's not a delay on your end, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not hearing a delay. My brain feels slightly delayed after watching those SpongeBob episodes.
We are professionals. We are professionals, folks. Henry, I'm gonna give you the opening volley into the minds of our audience. Unleash the nightmares, my friend. It's been too long. It's been just the two of us here tormenting each other and the good people out there and the bad people out there.
That you all show up on the viewing metrics the same, and that's how we like it. My first episode was called Who Are Zoo? With inexplicably the R is just the letter R. That doesn't really play into the story in any meaningful way. It's just how they chose to format the title.
Yeah, and every time, as you pointed out in our Patrick Star one, every time there's like zoo in the title, it always seems like a pun on our friend Zooey's name.
No, it's true. It's true. We've got to get Zooey back sometime. They were fantastic in their episode. Hello, if you're watching this, Zooey. Sound off in the comments. So, to keep a tradition alive that we may have actually started in the Zooey episode, though if we started it before, I apologize to the past. What would you guesstimate that the plot of Who Are Zoo is, Gus?
I would imagine it is SpongeBob or Patrick or some character that the writers wanted to torment being mistaken for a zoo animal somehow. Like they get stuck in a costume, or they get transfigured into some kind of beast, or like they get like a little scuffed up or dirty, and the entire world starts to treat them as if they are non-human and they belong in the zoo. And it's 11 minutes of them trying to get out, trying to talk to people, but they are simply dehumanized, and it is a nightmare from which they cannot escape for the next 11 minutes.
So, while you are not on the money with this episode, to the best of my knowledge, that does accurately describe a different SpongeBob episode. You know the one when Squidward gets kind of like caked in like mud and becomes this weird thing, and at the very end he meets those other creatures and he like gets to listen to that musician he likes.
Yeah, see, I remember that, seeing that episode, but like I couldn't tell you what the title is or like what Squidward's. He's like a vase, like he's like some kind of
He's like
clay
encased.
pot creature.
He's like encased in mud, and he has like one leaf like sticking out the top of his head, like some fucked up Pokemon.
Yeah, or like a weird like Legend of Zelda NPC that is like, collect my 5,000 seeds, nerd. You have spare time.
Collect my seeds and then kill me, I beg of you.
Plant my seeds so there can be more of me, but I don't want to live in a world where I see them.
I'm really gross, guys. I'm really, really gross. Okay, so this episode begins in a really bizarre way. At a zoo, duh, obviously. SpongeBob, yelling like Tarzan and dressed in a loincloth, swings out of the mouth of like a tiger fish, rescuing first a ball and then like a young child that was presumably like had like fallen into the enclosure Harambe style and was devoured by the creature until SpongeBob saved them. So what a way to start already.
I mean, that's what they should do every time, just get Tarzan on that. He knows the animals better than like any zookeeper could, even Kevin James, especially Kevin James, in fact.
Get into a slight bit of inside baseball as we sometimes do on SpongeBob Boys. This beginning really feels like informed by we have this one client that both Gus and I are contracted to, who we write like video pieces for, who is very specific about like, oh, the opening, it needs to be really gripping, it needs to raise questions, we're gonna start an immediate action.
If there is not a man in a loincloth swinging out of a tigerfish's mouth in the first minute, then like forget it.
Yeah, and I mean,
Throw it
you
in
know
the
what?
trash.
Maybe there's some wisdom to that because I was definitely it had my attention. So anyway, after doing this, he continues like Tarzan swinging on a vine from enclosure to enclosure, and he lands on the different animals, and they're basically just normal zoo animals that are like half fish, essentially. Like he lands on an elephant and is like, "What noise does an elephant make?" And it quacks, and he laughs. He like jumps onto the back of a giraffe and is like, "What noise does a giraffe make?" And the giraffe moos. I'm sure there are other such examples, but you might be able to see why this joke kind of slid off my brain a little
Right. The joke is, wow, that seems like that shouldn't happen.
bit. That isn't the noise that one makes.
That's completely incorrect, in fact.
Like again, here's the thing. Obviously, I don't want to make the mistake that some SpongeBob critics make of like getting angry at the show for not being like highbrow adult humor all the time. But like, as someone who has like younger brothers and has like as a result, like lived with kids of all different ages, this feels like a joke for a much younger age bracket. That it feels a lot more like Nick Jr. than Nick tier jokes in this episode, I've got to say.
Yeah, because, like, what sound the animal makes is definitely something that, like, kids grow out of. It really does not feel in keeping with a lot of the, like, level of jokes throughout SpongeBob's run.
What I will say is, and you have some inkling as to what I'm talking about here, Gus. Here's a little bit of foreshadowing for you folks at home. Some really adult jokes appear in this episode later, and my second episode was one that for several years was banned from airing. So that's something that you have to look
Oh,
forward to.
man. This show is remarkable because it never picks a demographic, like, even from minute to minute.
No, it really doesn't. So anyway, he swings out of the thing after establishing that he has a good relationship with all the animals, and he runs into the zookeeper, who is this like very high-strung purple fish. I would say that the defining element of this man's design. There's a good chance he's on screen right now, now that Gus is like, done the thing where we have an image for each episode on screen. But the defining thing is that this man is bulging out of his clothes. He is like stretching out of these buttons. And I don't really know why they decided to be like, yeah, this man's defining character trait is that he is going to be angry and high strung, and he is wearing a shirt that is 2 sizes too small for him.
Yeah. Yeah. His clothes don't fit and he mad. He's
Perhaps it was
angry.
that his shirt was too tight.
I know it's like probably not the case. It might be, I don't know. But like I'm wondering if this is like the like bikini bottom equivalent of Space Rube because that was also a purple fish. He was like a zookeeper of sorts.
No, no, here's the thing. I have since that thing seen Space Rube, and I know
And
that
Rube
he is,
Goldfish.
yeah, like a Rube Goldfish machine.
No, I activated him again. I'm sorry. Come back. Come
little
back.
little PTS sort of moment there. But no, this is a different weird purple fish, and he is real mad that SpongeBob is interacting with the animals, including this one animal question mark that I sent you a picture of, Gus. That is just this giant green beast with
It's
so many
bad.
eyes and
I
tentacles.
hate it. That's
It's
a
bizarre.
CR21 aberration right there.
Yeah, no, we're calling them things level twos. You don't want to know what they're doing in the back rooms.
Oh man, what a loper.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep. The what this leads to is that this guy gets so angry at SpongeBob, he bans him from the zoo, and he enforces this ban by putting like a house arrest style like ankle bracelet on him that will sound a specific anti-SpongeBob alarm if he tries to like climb into the enclosures again.
you know, kids cartoons and making like ankle bracelet references. What is it like with like it's so prevalent and I'm not saying it's not charming, but like they love ankle bracelets so much.
And also, like, look, I'm not trying to be the fun police here, but you do kind of have to question the kind of ethics of an episode of a show for kids that presents someone who is stopping the protagonist from crawling into animal enclosures at the zoo as an antagonist.
No, I mean it's related. How are you gonna help that one uncle do what he does? You know, we all have that one uncle.
Leave your favorite bit of trivia about that one uncle in the comments to just tell us what he gets up to when he's not doing devil finger, setting things on fire, or throwing you into the animal enclosures at the zoo.
Real talk, it does remind me of like back when I used to work on a farm. My backstory is convoluted, but there was this man who like showed up to feed the geese, and he would like jump over the fence and just like feed them donuts, and he had to be escorted out because you simply cannot do that. You cannot jump into all the enclosures and feed the animals.
Do you know what this reminds me of, Gus? Do you remember me and Meg told you that story of in that neighborhood we used to live in the UK? There was that goose in that enclosure that every morning that
Yeah.
dude would show up and he'd have a joint and he'd be smoking it and he would smoke weed with the goose who he was on first name basis with. You just hear him going, Gary! In the morning as he approached the goose, and he'd just sit there, the goose would come up and he would just like blow weed smoke into the goose's mouth.
The goose loves
I don't
it.
know why dudes are like this. Yeah, no, he's gave him real munchies. It's oh, you don't have any donuts, do you?
Yeah, there is I guess there's a class of dude out there that is like a goose whisperer. Who are we to question their ways, right?
No, I'm also just thinking like the weird uncle, Devil Finger, likes to start fires, will throw you into animal enclosures at the zoo. I think the uncle might be Count Olaf from a series of unfortunate events. But anyway, that aside, SpongeBob is devastated that he's not allowed to Harambe himself anymore, and is weeping on top of Patrick's rock while Patrick comforts him. And this is another thing that there are certain recurring tropes that we kind of observe in SpongeBob Boys episodes. One of them being that like some of these episodes are so weirdly like over animated, and in this there's a moment where as he's crying because he's laying sideways, um tears from one eye fall into and fill up the other eyelid before then falling out of that, and that is not even the grossest thing that gets done with eyelids in my two episodes today.
Oh geez, that's awful. But yeah, no, you're so right how it's just like sometimes like, hey, I thought of a funny way to make crying the most like
Repulsive.
ridiculously animated thing ever. Yeah. No, yeah, it's gross, but it's also one of those things where it's always like, oh, that is so much work for just this like minute of crying.
No, it's true. Like SpongeBob is really a show with it, like a little bit of an identity crisis of what its humor is like these days. But anyway, so while he's doing this, Patrick is complaining, talking about how he'd love to go and like beat the shit out of the zookeeper, and that do you know what? Maybe we should just make our own zoo. And as he's saying that, SpongeBob blows a snot bubble, which separates and starts floating, and he grabs it and is like, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Patrick? We should make a bubble zoo." And then the bubble pops and covers both of them in snot, and they both just scream, Bubble Zoo.
Oh, but please tell me that they will make these bubble animals out of actual bubble stuff and not the unnecessary, repulsively disgusting snot that SpongeBob just blew out his nose.
They're going to throw you a bone this time. They do use a bottle of extra strength bubble soap. And that they build all of these different animals, different enclosures for them, and people start coming over. And a clip that is going to play in a second, people start showing up to see all the animals. SpongeBob says that the only cost of getting in is a smile. So he lets the smiling people in, and this one kid who is like frowning, he's like, "Hey, before you come in, let's turn that frown upside down." Turns it upside down. He's smiling, lets him in. But then it gets to Patrick, who is standing next to like a TSA style plastic tub with a sign next to it saying "No sharp objects." And Old Man Jenkins variant 50 comes through and Patrick stops him. He says to him, "Okay, old man, spread 'em." You can't fucking do that. And then in the tub, you see live action objects, including a pizza cutter and a porcupine, get thrown into it while the old man goes, "Oh, ah!" And the last thing when the porcupine is thrown out, he just goes, "Rascal." And it's like, what are we doing here, fellas?
Yeah, you simply cannot have Patrick pulling a zillion sharp objects out of an old man's ass.
I don't think Old Man Jenkins was here for the animals, man.
No, I think he knew. I think he knew what the security detail was. And, he prepared that morning.
He comes in and is like, "Oh no, I hope I don't get cavity searched by a big, strong starfish today."
I don't have so many sharp objects in my old man fish anus.
This is what that Gillian Flynn novel, Sharp Objects, is about. All the stuff that's up Old Man Jenkins' ass.
The thing is, like, the bit is crazy enough, right? The fact that Patrick says spread them.
No, like I was watching a video the other day, which is all of the things that like the like email arguments that Alex Hirsch had with standards and practices for Gravity Falls, and like the different insane things they were pulling him up on. But it shows what an absolute like wasteland of perversion Nickelodeon is, that some script supervisor saw spread 'em and was like, "Excellent, cut, print, send it to Bill Fagerbakke."
It's SpongeBob. We don't care anymore. It can be anything.
Do you have any idea the fires we're having to put out in our live action departments due to certain documentaries coming out? Who gives a shit what Patrick says? He can say slurs if he wants to. No one cares.
Oh man, one of these SpongeBob boys, man, we're gonna happen upon some stuff that like we cannot describe on YouTube.
Maybe we should sell a T-shirt that has a picture of Patrick with a speech bubble that just says slurs between two asterisks. I can't imagine how that would possibly backfire on us. That seems like a genius thing that a real show should do.
That could never be misinterpreted. You're so right.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
God, I wish other people were as smart as us to
Yeah,
implement ideas like that into their real shows.
if only, man. If only. Anyway, so in the zoo, they're looking at different animals. There are weird acts, but they, for some reason, what is a feature of both zoos is that in addition to more standard animals, there are just incomprehensible beasts that SpongeBob refers to as sea monsters. And Patrick gets eaten by one and is just like floating in its body. It's really strange. But then naturally, Squidward wanders in, who is dressed in like farmer's overalls for some reason. I can't exactly remember why. I think I was still at this point getting over being flashbanged by Spread'em, like only moments earlier. Squidward wanders into a thing and I can't even remember which animal, but it tears his clothes off. So he's just in his underwear. And the thing is, man,
Why? Okay, is this?
yeah, are you gonna say the same thing I'm about to say? What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, is this Squidward wearing like tidy whities on his bottom half?
Yeah, which raises questions about what he's doing the rest of the time.
Can we define modesty for Squidward tentacles?
Maybe the logic is, as a cashier, like with the like desk and the cash register in front of him, people never see that he's slanging it just below the desk. So he's gone away from it with all these years.
That logic is incredible and infallible because the only other like main place that Squidward is at his house and on his street. And you know SpongeBob and Patrick wouldn't care if Squidward was like always naked from the waist down. They'd be like, "Yeah, you know what? That's Squidward. He's a real free spirit. He's an artiste."
I was gonna say, like we've said in previous episodes, he's a bit of a hippie type, so maybe he is like a partial nudist. Who's to say?
You know, when Squidward's, he's doing a nice day at the zoo wearing his finest overalls, his Sunday best, he's got to also wear underwear underneath so that people don't think he's a slut.
But this gets weirder. One of the giant creatures comes and eats Squidward, and the bubble creatures, by the way, and then it lays a bubble egg in a nest with him in it. And it pops open, and Patrick, who is speaking to a crowd, gestures to him and goes, "Behold, Squidward has been reborn," and everyone claps. After this, at a point, the bubble creatures just kind of start to go rogue and begin like attacking people and like getting out of their enclosures. And that they begin to try and attack SpongeBob and Patrick. I don't even really remember there being a clear, like, inciting incident for this. It just happened. And SpongeBob and Patrick are backed up against the wall against Squidward's house, and they start screaming. That they start like going ape and attacking the entire town. Because a weird thing that this episode has, and I think this is a real problem in a lot of like writing for different shows, when they feel the need to be like every major cast member needs to be in every episode.
Yeah, yeah, where it's just like, oh, it's time to show how this is affecting the whole town. Here's an example with this character, and this character, and this character, and everyone's here because the fans have got to see their favorites.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it always kind of blows because it is always just the most obvious joke. Like bubble creatures are rampaging in the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs grabs the cash register and is like, "Take me customers, but don't take me money." And then, in a slightly less obvious turn, sits on the cash register and activates like rocket boosters beneath it that like blow him through the ceiling, and a bunch of penguins attack and overrun the chum bucket. And again, weirdly, this connects to our Patrick T-shirt earlier, not naming any names. But like, why is it such a hack thing to just be like penguins equals funny? You know? Have you noticed that? It's like a very 2010s thing.
I think it's just because penguins are so adjacent to like narwhals in terms of where they live that like some of that
Some residual lol so random humor.
it rubbed off on them. Yeah.
SpongeBob and Patrick are like screaming in horror as the animals approach. As often happens in this show, Patrick climbs into SpongeBob after throwing away his brain. Don't think about it too hard. They what was I gonna say? SpongeBob screams, and in screaming attracts the real animals, which come in and scare off the bubble animals.
I was gonna say, like, up until this point, like, SpongeBob should really know by now that he is like a bubble wizard. Like, after what happened in Bubble Town, does he not realize that these are his creations to, like, destroy, build, destroy?
Yeah, I mean, his mastery over the bubbles is inconsistent. It's a power that I mean, maybe it's because this is extra strength bubble soap.
Oh, yeah, it's beyond his capabilities.
It's beyond the scope of
You're
ability.
right. That's a good point. Also, like, it is moot because against the true power of the Mega Beasts, he stands no chance.
It's true. It's true. So anyway, the real animals win this confrontation of intimidation and scare the pretenders back into the bubble soap box. And the episode ends with, because SpongeBob brings the animals back, the zookeeper changes his tune, removes the ankle bracelet, and all is right with the world. So I'm not going to pretend it was necessarily an episode that I derived a great deal of enjoyment from, but I think it also did have more of a solid beginning, middle, and end than a lot of episodes we encounter. So I think we've got to give it that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's a decent zoo episode, which seems hard to do for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things that, depending on the nature of your show, like, really, what are the possibilities beyond just like animal rampage? You know?
No, you're right. You're right. Nobody just goes to the zoo and is like, "Ah, we fed the iguanodons today." Like it that's not a
Yeah,
plot, you know?
we were hoping we'd see the tiger, but it was asleep when we went, which like reflects a lot of like zoo experiences I've
Yeah.
had.
What if we just did 11 minutes of cavity searching?
Horrible.
Ugh. So speaking of asses, are you ready for my first
No,
episode?
don't say that.
Are you
What
ready?
was it? I know that from what you sent me that Bubble Bass is in it, and you can't spell Bubble Bass without
Not
arse.
just Bubble Bass, my friend. Big bad Bubble Bass is here.
What does this make normal Bubble Bass?
It doesn't matter.
Well, I guess maybe this is to create contrast from his superhero persona.
What was his name? Ass Man?
Yeah, I choose to modify the memories in my own head and believe that they called him Arse Man in the episode. The villain was a hoodoo guru, the voodoo villain. I think Arse Man is, by the numbers, less offensive than that.
Yeah. And so, it's funny that you bring up Swamp Mates because this episode relates to Swamp Mates in an interesting way in that it also has sort of a storybook framing device.
I think that is something that they do when they like just desperately need to like kill like a minute or so of extra time.
Yeah, yeah. Though this one, the framing device is a bit more intrusive. And it's also like a lot stranger in terms of why this character and how this character. We open the episode on Plankton's computer wife, Karen, as a like magical fairy, and she is wearing like a dress and she's holding a wand and she's like floating around the screen in front of this big storybook and she goes, "I'm Karen, the blue fairy, and this is the story of Big Bad Bubble Bass."
Why has so much been written on the subject of this man
I don't know.
in universe?
It's remarkable that like it's always like these literary tales of Bubble Bass which may take place in an else world. It's hard to say.
It's like the SpongeBob equivalent of those like airport like paperback thrillers, like Nesbo's latest Bubble Bass novel has him in his most compelling mystery yet.
Exactly. Bubble Bass in Ghost Target, in Vengeance,
Yeah,
in Redemption,
written by the critical drink.
the Critical Bass with his shitical ass.
I mean, he was nostalgia critic in a fucking Patrick Show episode, wasn't he?
The thing about Bubble Bass is that, like, yeah, like in some ways he would be the character who is like an internet critic. In other ways, Bubble Bass's character is such a weird sticking point in modern SpongeBob, and for reasons we'll actually get into in my second episode. For now, you can expect the sort of like he's the nerd. He's the nerd who lives with his mom, and that's the joke.
It's true. He can just be whatever, like, vaguely mean-spirited thing they need him to be.
Okay, so we go into the storybook, and Bubble Bass is awakened by his mermaid man clock that screams evil, and he punches it because, let's just use that clip forever because we have the rights forever.
Let's get the Ouija board out, get another soundbite from Ernest Borgnine.
My goodness, or just the same one. So anyway, Bubble Bass wakes up. He's like, Kalu Kaleo Fraptious Day. There's a sale at the toy store. I have to get this brand new. He goes over to the shelf, and there's stuff like there's like a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and there's a Miss Appear which has nothing in it, which I thought was a fun visual gag. You see these two figurines that are War Pig and Bionic Pig, and they're part of the Swine Force 3. Bubble Bass holds up a poster and he goes like, at last, today is the day I can buy Pigilan, the leader of Swine Force 3.
Yay, I'm so happy for you, Bubble Bass. I hope you get Pigilan.
Henry, you've known my writing and my stylings enough to know. Does Pigilan not sound like something I would come up with as like a character name?
No, it's true. It's true. Like, as we often say, kind of off mic in creative discussions, you're a very conceptual man. And the idea of, like, yeah, there are three guys. They're pigs. They're the Swine Force 3, and their leader is Pigulon, and there's War Pig, and what's the other one called?
Bionic Pig.
A Bionic Pig.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that does feel very.
because it's like, yeah, his whole thing is like he's a pig. Elon. But yeah, so like Bubble Bass, he wants to get his hands on this exclusive figurine, and so he dons cosplay. He dresses up as supposedly Wolfman Boy, who is their arch enemy. You see where this is going?
Is he going to consume their flesh?
Well, well,
What? Don't say well. Like, that's not what I want to hear. Direwolf fans, rise up. She's still real to me, damn it.
all I can tell you right now is that he is rocking some Wolfman Boy cosplay, and it takes him so long to put on this cosplay that he goes down to the store, but he's late, and all the Pigulons have already been sold. And can you guess who has the last of the Pigulons?
Okay, alright. Either SpongeBob or Plankton.
It's actually both SpongeBob and Patrick.
Of course, I'm glad that we can continue the sizzling Bubble Bass Patrick bromance we encountered in earlier episodes.
Will we? Because so SpongeBob and Patrick come out of the store and they've got the Pigulon. They're like, "Yay, hip hip hooray, Pigulon!" And they walk like away from Bubble Bass, and Patrick pulls the Pigulon out of the box, and Bubble Bass, in this current year, goes, "Oh, you removed it from the packaging. That removes half its value because that's still funny. Damn it."
I just, as we've said in previous episodes, animation writers, how they love to pull out the classic.
Oh yeah, like that. The I know we've invoked the Bogleach Tumblr post. It continues to be relevant. It like hasn't changed at all.
No, it's true. It's true.
Anyway, Patrick sticks Pigulon up his ass.
No, no, come on.
He does. He does. Like he like basically like puts it there. We don't see like cheeks or anything, but he's like facing sideways and he's like scratching his ass with it. And Bubble Bass goes, "No, that was the other half of the value." And he swears a solemn oath to get Pigulon back and save it from these two monsters.
This is really like you know those like viral X-ray things of like someone who's like shoved Buzz Lightyear up their arse and somehow like got the wings open up there so they couldn't get him out. I have a feeling that's where this episode's gonna go.
Red and Patrick. It's your turn now.
What goes around comes around.
Thankfully, Pigilan is wingless, so he is retrieved easily by the time Bubble Pass gets over there. And Bubble Pass is like, "Oh, can I buy, trade, and/or swindle this Pigilan off of you?" In a truly bizarre moment of characterization, SpongeBob gives Pigulon freely because Bubble Bass is his friend. He's like, anything for a friend. Meanwhile, Patrick all of a sudden goes, "No! I want to play with Pigulon. He's mine!" And SpongeBob goes, "Oh, yeah! Patrick, you pitched in for it, so it actually belongs to both of us." And they go off and walk away from Bubble Bass, leaving him in the lurch. Patrick is not friends with Bubble Bass. Swamp mates did not matter. They learned nothing.
I could have told you that swamp mates did not matter before you'd even watched this episode.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, why is SpongeBob all of a sudden friends with Bubble Bass, and why is Patrick not? If that's what they were going with in those other episodes.
Because this weird, stupid show has negative continuity for some reason.
That's true. TV tropes will tell you it. Anyway, Bubble Bass, he swears by the gods of nerddom, actual quote, that he will get Pigulon back.
Well, I'm glad that he's made this oath to the gods of nerddom. That really sets it into
Oh yeah,
stone.
and then Karen shows up, and she's like, Bubble Bass, ranted alone to nobody, doing like a silly whimsical rhyme. And she's in the story now, and Bubble Bass goes foul machine, and he like pushes her out of the frame. So unlike Swamp Mates, like Karen, who is the blue fairy who is narrating this, is also a character within the story who can be interacted with.
Huh?
It's not the last time that happens.
I feel like we often have to ask, what level of reality is this operating on as we get into these stories, you know?
Yeah, and for like this particular brand of fairy tale bubble bass action figure odysseys, which is a genre of SpongeBob episode, I would guess that the level of reality is like, I don't know, 30 Percocets down.
Yeah, it's in the like the Benadryl hallways from that one SpongeBob
Oh, it'll
meme.
get you. But anyway, yeah, Bubble Bass, he's crafty. He goes to SpongeBob's house where SpongeBob and Patrick are playing with Pigulon, and he has donned the disguise of a toy inspector. Naturally, he is also wearing the wolf costume under the toy inspector costume. Still,
Feels like you cannot trust a man who will try to get into someone's house under the pretense of being a toy inspector.
yeah.
That's a menacing
Yeah,
individual.
because it's like I'm an adult man, and also I've never heard of that, and also I am calling the police right now. And also, you're a wolf. You're dressed as a wolf. Like, why are you still dressed as a wolf? Clearly, under your toy inspector disguise, Bubble Bass, the character from SpongeBob SquarePants season 13.
When will we get the answers?
So naturally, SpongeBob has a huge vault full of toys in his house, which he unlocks using like an elaborate dance slash handshake slash playing the like doodly doot 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 tune to open the vault. Inside the vault, Bubble Bass is like, all right, naturally, this will. I'll do the inspection. I'll find a dangerous toy, and I'll take Pigulon away. But SpongeBob and Patrick throw him for a loop by like taking him through the alphabet of like all the toys they own. So they start with like, this is Andy Aardvark. Is he dangerous? And Bubble Bass holds him and like it like karate chops him in the face or something. And then they have like Abby Aardvark who like her head pops off and hits him in the eye. There's a third Aardvark that just fucking explodes like in fire.
I love how this is becoming like a terrible version of the hash slinging. Not hash, sorry, the Tattletale Strangler episode.
Well, I mean, the thing is, a lot of modern SpongeBob episodes are the Tattletale Strangler. Just substituting the Tattletale Strangler with, like, even characters like Squidward, who are close to the main cast, become that. And then SpongeBob and Patrick become these, like, these trolls who are just so annoying that nothing bad can happen to them.
It's truly just baffling on every front.
Yeah, so Bubble Bass is going through all of this, and there we get a little bit of the narrator going like many, many toys later, and they get to the peas. SpongeBob finally holds up.
Do they now?
SpongeBob finally holds up. It's the porktastic Pigilan. Is he dangerous? And Bubble Bass, who is like covered in like casts and bandages, is like, "Oh yes, he's very dangerous." And he reaches for Pigilan, and SpongeBob goes, "Oh wait, there's this other toy you have to do first. This is Perilous Percival." And he hands him this like other action figure that is covered in fireworks and dynamite that Bubble Bass takes into his hand, and it launches them both out of the house into the sky, where they explode into a grand fireworks display.
Where are you getting these from, SpongeBob? Like, who's your dealer for all of these? Like some fucking like second-rate Batman
These
villain
dangerous
has
toys.
given you all of
Yeah,
these?
like I thought the only guy in town who made tech like this was Plankton. You know, I didn't know Doctor Wondertainment was canon in the SpongeBob SquarePants
Yeah,
universe.
no, it's true. Like that, this is fully some Doctor Entertainment shit, and poor Bubble Bass is having to bear the brunt.
But it's okay, Henry, because the toy inspector plot might have gone. He has another disguise that is, again, he will not leave the wolf suit. By the way, do you understand where that's going? Do you get the significance of that?
Again, I feel like I'm to a degree cognitively impaired by the things that are happening around me. So I think it's going to be as much as a surprise for me as it is for the like dribbling iPad baby who is watching this.
That's fair. I'm just so glad that I sent you a picture of like Bubble Bass in the wolf suit before we started recording. That way you know that I'm not making up this like Pigulon and Bubble Bass in a furry suit and
If you told me that like that there was a line in here that implied that Patrick stuffed it up his ass to stimulate his like G spot, I'd believe you. I
I
think.
mean his P spot because he's Patrick.
No, I didn't mean that. I would have said that if I meant that. All right, what the fuck happens now?
Bubble Bass is still in the wolf costume, but this time he shows up as a world famous ghost explorer. Ghost inspector, sorry. Sorry, ghost hunter? Yeah, that's what it is. That's the ticket. And
I like to explore ghost bodies.
he detects a massive haunting inside of SpongeBob's house.
It's out of Patrick's ass.
Oh, good boy. And he goes and he has a like a machine that is like, like sort of ghost hunting equipment. And he's like, I'm getting big readings in here. Beep, beep, beep. Like he's making his own beeping sounds. And then he gets to Pigulon that is lying on the ground. And he's like, this houses a malevolent spirit, this object. And SpongeBob and Patrick simultaneously go, "Oh no, not Pigulon!"
It's everyone's favorite character to complete the was it the Swine Force trio?
Swine Force 3, which the thing is, I love how much SpongeBob and Patrick love Pigulon. Like there's something charming about the name Pigulon. The more the characters say it in this episode, the more that I'm enjoying myself as I'm watching.
I think this is a kind of love very unique to your particular pathology. I can't say I feel the same warmth to him. Maybe it's Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, SpongeBob and Patrick are like, "Don't worry, Bubble Bass." Well, they don't know it's him. "Don't worry, Ghost Hunter. We'll banish the spirit from Pigulon ourselves." And SpongeBob has a like raised summoning circle pentagram thing in the middle of his house, and him and Patrick don like brown cloaks. They begin to chant like nonsense words, but they're consistent, which means there's probably some secret in joke or like you play them backwards or something. But they were mumbling over each other. I couldn't get what they were saying. But Pigulon begins to raise into the sky and glow as they're doing this.
It becomes some like Oculus thing where like he manipulates Bubble Bass into killing both of them and then is arrested. And the Pigulon moves on to someone else to do the same thing all over again.
I mean, there is like actual supernatural nonsense afoot. Or I guess this is a pig, a hoof. Because out of Pigulon comes forth a like pig skull, a blue pig skull with two bony arms that like is like, who dares banish me? And Patrick points at Bubble Bass and says, he started it. And with like a sick metal riff, this evil pig spirit grabs Bubble Bass and takes him to the nether realm.
He's fucking dead.
Yeah, Pigilan drops harmlessly onto the floor, and SpongeBob and Patrick resume playing with him. We cut to outside, and Bubble Bass is drenched in green ectoplasm. And he is walking back towards SpongeBob's house, still in the wolf costume, still playing those hits.
Hell yeah. It's almost comforting to know that some things in life remain constant.
So I'm going to read to you his exact quote, and I think this will reveal the dark truth about this episode and the fact that it has finally decided to play its hand after like nearly 7 minutes of entirely nonsensical nonsense. Are you ready?
As I can be.
Bubble Bass says, Scumbob! Putrick! You blithering fools better hand over Pigilan, or I'll chug, and I'll glug, and I'll belch your house down!
I hate this. I hate it. It's bad.
So the Swine Force 3, Henry. 3 little pigs?
Yeah. It's so clever. It's so
Oh,
clever.
but not nearly as clever as Bubble Bass pulling out Fizz Bomb Soda, which he's going to use as, and I quote, burp fuel.
I fucking hate this show. Both SpongeBob and SpongeBob boys. Why do we do this?
We do this because it's normal. Because we're normal men, Henry.
Because people watch it for some reason.
Anyway, he does it. He destroys SpongeBob's house with a thunderous belch from the depths of his bubble body.
Truly, he's lethal from both ends.
Oh yeah. And SpongeBob
You okay there?
if shits could kill.
No.
Sorry, I'm not nothing.
I have actually thought, right? I've actually thought.
Oh boy. I
Imagine
cannot wait.
how horrifying it would be in a thing if to kill someone like tied a person down and just shit so hard and so prodigiously it just like buried the person's head and suffocated them.
See,
That's the worst way to go, I think.
no, that is extremely bad. I thought you were gonna go with like almost like some like deleted scene from Hancock stuff where like the shit is like a grenade. Like it just right out.
Do you remember how in Hancock he shoved that dude's head up? I think Eddie Marzin's arse.
What was that movie, dude? Like that was like that was like at a weird time for like superhero media in general. I think like
Hancock is a liminal film.
Hancock's not half the superhero as Pigulon,
Who could be?
who could be. So SpongeBob and Patrick's house has been destroyed. Sorry, SpongeBob's house. I forgot that they're not married. They run over and across the street and hide under Patrick's rock. It's time for formula. Bubble Bass runs over and he goes, "You hand over that Pigulon, or I'll chug and I'll glug and I'll belch
Enough
your
of
house down."
this. Enough of this.
Real bad. So then we get like God's grace upon us because we get the one good joke of the episode.
God has no place here.
The one good joke of the episode. And no, I'm not talking about this 11-minute installment of SpongeBob. I'm talking about this entire SpongeBob boys. We have
Go on.
Bubble Bass run up to the house and he's gonna do it. He's gonna chug and glug and belch it down. And Patrick goes, "Good luck. I built this rock entirely out of rock."
Okay, that's a good joke.
It made me laugh. It made me chuckle. And so Bubble Bass,
What do you reckon of Bikini Bottom's like stand your ground laws? Because I'm just picturing the alternate ending where Patrick pops the lid of that rock and fucking cuts Bubble Bass in half with a sword off 12 gauge, and it's completely legal. Cuts,
What?
cuts, cuts!
What?
The Sandcastle Doctrine!
The Castle Doctrine! Sand your grave! Woo! Yeah, doesn't matter because Bubble Bass has got the fizz bomb and he takes it up a notch by adding volcanic hot sauce. And he pours both down his throat and he
You're just hurting yourself here, Bubble Bass.
fire belches the rock into ash, leaving SpongeBob and Patrick to flee once more to Squidward's house.
Squidward's a house. It is so funny, just this thing of like, yeah, and he has hot sauce, and he puts a clamp on his nuts, and he like
Whoa!
puts needles through his nipples.
Whoa!
Like just everything is like this somehow will enhance the attack.
He's doing the most powerful burp known to man. Well, we'll get there. He shows up at Squidward's house, and Squidward is annoyed to see SpongeBob and Patrick. And Bubble Bass is like, may I have the Pigilan figurine that is on your premises? And Squidward slaps him in the face, and he's just like, nope, I'm not interested in any of this. Slap, slap, slap. And he, like, slaps him out of his house and closes the door. And so Bubble Bass goes, all right. I'll chug and I'll plug and I'll melt your house down.
I hate this.
And he, in a big truck full of fizz bomb soda, pulls up to the curb and he drinks it fucking dry, just like my dick. And then he turns back to the
I
house.
just like
Don't interrupt me.
I'm sorry, please keep going.
Turns back to the house. And he opens his mouth and he belches like a monster, like a creature from the depths, like the bloop of the Mariana Trench itself, like God taking a shit. And wouldn't you know it, Squidward's house is still standing. I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
Just like I can't imagine looking at this script and thinking, yes, I'm done. I'm gonna turn this into my boss,
Yeah.
Nickelodeon.
Well, you know, nothing says like we're doing the Three Little Pigs like a ghost hunting section, a toy exploration inspection section, and just so much burping.
Oh yeah, this was about getting an action figure. Like again, I'm realizing that Who Are Zoo was actually very like cogent and efficient in its storytelling.
This is like again, it's like it's a Swamp Mates like. I didn't know that that was going to be a type of SpongeBob episode, but like, what else do we call it? Where we have like literary framing device, we have a weird emphasis on these fake in-universe superheroes that barely exist outside of this episode. We have Bubble Bass putting on weird costumes. We have SpongeBob and Patrick performing supernatural rituals. It's Jigokuda, man. That's all I can say.
How do they like? I'm consistently astonished how they fit this shit into 11 minutes.
It's almost over because Squidward is like, my house is SpongeBob proof. You cannot you cannot tear it down. You suck, Bubble Bass. Go home, basically.
Good on you, Squidward.
Karen begins to narrate and is like, Bubble Bass returned home and cried to his mother and blah blah blah, and she rhymes, and I couldn't bother to write the rhymes down. But Bubble Bass sort of in the style of the ancient tale of Beowulf, he he brings his mother into the equation. Mama Bubble Bass drives up in the family car and she goes, I'm disappointed in you, son. You should be belching at least a 10th grade level. And she walks up to the house and Bubble Bass offers her the fizz bomb soda and she says, I don't need that. And she pulls up her waistband. And Bubble Bass's mother
This is so puerile.
and Bubble Bass's mom expands to the height of Squidward's house and unleashes a titanic, unforgivable war crime level belch that destroys the ocean itself. We cut to the island up above the water and we see it sitting there, and the water goes away and the island falls into the empty negative space, never to be seen again. Squidward is mashed into the very stones of his house, barely cognizant of what has happened here. Bubble Bass and his mother walk forward to find SpongeBob and Patrick buried under rubble. Bubble Bass's mother is like, "Give my son back his toy," as she attempts to wrench it from their broken bodies. But SpongeBob turns the tables by pulling out the receipt and proving that he and Patrick did in fact purchase this Pigilan.
This has been one joke. This is one joke in various, like, to call it a joke is generous. Frankly,
It's a bodily function that like does not does not add value to this being the Three Little Pigs in its own weird way.
like really, like what's even like they play the sound louder and animate him having a more exaggerated face. This is nothing to nobody.
Exactly. And like the joke ultimately culminates in Bubble Bass's mother unleashing a second burp on her own son. And it like
I hate this. This is so weird.
it blasts him. I think that there's like another sort of like almost like nuclear like light goes off, and the end result is that Bubble Bass's like clothing, the wolf costume, all of it except for his underwear, which has like a purple star on it, all of his clothing is blown off. He cowers, turning his ass towards the camera with his well-defined rounded cheeks and his face in the dirt. SpongeBob and Patrick are like, "Hey, we feel kind of bad for you, so here's Pigilan." And the episode ends with Squidward, like, Karen is doing the ending narration, and Squidward sees her and goes, "Hey, this all happened because of your fairy tale. Get back here." And he runs away from, like, the house that he's rebuilding. And then Karen jumps into the storybook, which closes and vanishes before Squidward's eyes. And then he turns to us, and there's an iris out.
I fully expected this to end with like us, the audience, being belched on, because why not? It weirdly reminds me of this story that Stephen King, not even a fictitious one that he
In on
told at the
writing,
start of his memoir.
in on
Yeah, in on writing,
with his like
where his babysitter who would like lock him in the closet and like fart on him.
yeah, like she was just obsessed with like just like destroying him with the most powerful rank farts.
I mean, I've got to admit, if that happened to me, I would not write it down, let alone in a best-selling memoir slash writing guide. But like, I think that's one of those things I'd take to my grave with me.
Well, maybe it's that kind of very specific like fart trauma that turns an ordinary child into Stephen King, one of the most prolific
Yeah,
authors of
no,
all time.
maybe she was a time traveler who was like, "Look, this is gonna seem weird now, but this is essential in your development into leaving an indelible mark on culture. Anyway, I'm gonna make like Patrick and spread them."
And on the seat of your pants. That is the other indelible mark. No, I'm just picturing this babysitter like in the future. Um, Disney Pixar's DreamWorks Loki from Marvel, the TV show, shows up with the time police and goes, "Listen, like all these Stephen King novels that you enjoy, The Shawshank Redemption, it, um, the one with the tall grass, you will not be able to enjoy any of them
Favorite.
unless you go back in time and fart on that little boy who's gonna write those books. You have to do it. It's the sacred timeline.
Back to the future.
Ass to the future.
Can I
Blast to the
can I do
past.
my episode now?
No. Yes.
I feel like I need to go somewhere and take in like a deep lungful of fresh air, fresh ass. Um, okay, so
Wow. Oh, I love SpongeBob boys.
that makes one of us. Okay, so my next episode is called Quarantined Crabs, spelled quarantined KWA
Whoa!
rather than QU.
Topical issue?
Um, well,
Whoa!
no, here's the thing is, this episode was made and slated to come out in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, so they banned its release for 2 years.
I forgot that bit of lore that you mentioned at the beginning that was true.
Yeah, no, it's legitimate. So,
All
are you
right.
ready to enter the quarantine with quarantine crabs?
Oh yeah, well the one thing that could help me survive quarantine is Mr. Krabs' fat ass.
Exactly. Well, he's actually going to make it a lot worse in this episode.
Oh no.
So, Mr. Krabs, basically the whole cast are in the Krusty Krab. Mrs. Puff is there eating lunch with Pearl, and Mr. Krabs is like, my two favorite gals having lunch together, which it's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's a little wholesome.
Patrick is there doing fucking something. Squidward is slanging it beneath the cash register as usual.
As he usually does. He's hash slinging it. He's dash
Yeah,
flinging it.
he,
He's crash flinging it. I'm so
the
sorry.
cock slinging streaker. Um,
The
anyway,
the goose
so
shooting. Go on.
the goose shooting pooter. All right, so I'm gonna need to have a fucking nap after this. Holy shit, I'm exhausted.
The cum shotting slasher.
Enough. So, SpongeBob emerges from the kitchen. His eyes are closed, but like his eyelids are like livid and bulging, and he makes his way over to the table where Mrs. Puff and Pearl are eating, and he feels up Mrs. Puff's face, and it's like, oh, it must be Mrs. Puff, and she's like, oh, SpongeBob, we agreed that we would pretend not to know each other outside of class, and he's like, well, mystery lady, here are your Krabby Patties, and he opens his eyes, and his eyes like spit out the bottom bun, the burger, the lettuce, the cheese, they squirt sauce, and then the top bun, and it's just like,
Oh,
why'd you do it like that?
SpongeBob,
Why'd you do it like that?
this is improper on many levels. This is not the way you should treat anyone. Like,
And then, perhaps deservedly, the health inspector enters.
the inspector.
Mr. Mr. Krabs literally says, the health inspector, but I already bribed you this month.
Oh my god, Drayton Krabs in full effect.
Yeah, yeah, pulls out his like fat stacks. So anyway, he like the health inspector pulls out this like sensor, a bit like the thing from Ghostbusters, and it beeps, and he's like, there is clear sign that one of you is infected with the clam flu. We need to quarantine this place. And he locks up the doors.
Sorry,
Yeah?
sorry, my brain is just so poisoned at this point. When you say one of you is infected with the cla, I was expecting a different consonant at the end of that word, and I'm glad it was something else.
Syphilis itch pants. Syphilis itch.
Oh
Um,
boy.
this thing's gonorrhean right off the rails.
He's a yellow waffle.
Fuck you. All right. So he closes the door, locks it up, and then Plankton emerges from one of the drinks, and it's like, well, looks like Operation Soda Jerk is off. I'm getting out of here. And he runs into the kitchen, climbs up through the vent, jumps outside, and is like, lucky that I won't have to like be in there getting sick with you. And then Plankton is flamethrowered and is reduced to a pile of ash with an eye in it by like a robot and like the hazmat guys outside of the building, and they're like, "Wow, I guess we probably shouldn't escape."
Whoa. Okay, so like they're taking this real seriously. This is 2319 on the scare floor level.
No, it's true. It's true. Like it was giving the energy of the admittedly, I think, very underrated 2010s remake of The Crazies with Timothy Olyphant. Good movie. People should check it out. Anyway, so they're back inside and they're like, "Well, what should we do?" Because the biggest problem is we don't know which of us is sick. And Mr. Krabs is like, "Oh, we have a solution for this," like back in the Navy. And he pulls his shirt off and he's tatted up with like sailor tats all over his body.
Yes.
And when he tells this story, the visuals are indicated by tattoos on him. And he's like, "Oh, when someone would get sick on the ship, we'd identify the sicko, throw him in the freezer, and then we'd just have a good time on the boat knowing we didn't have to worry about getting ill." And Mrs. Puff goes, and you'd let them out of the freezer when they got better, right?" And Mr. Krabs pauses and is like, "Well, I assume someone must have, eventually."
Mr. Krabs violated the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, no, Mr. Krabs killed crewmates in the freezer when he was a Navy man. He's a sinister dude.
Yeah, he threw the plague victims overboard.
Yeah, so he's like, "Okay, so now we just need to identify who the sicko is. If you feel queasy, put your hand up." And I can't remember exactly how he gets nabbed, but he starts to think that SpongeBob is sick. So he has the other people gang up and lock him in the freezer.
Oh, all right.
It's weird. It's getting very like it feels like one of those kind of like very like bleak bottle movies. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, where it's like a bunch of people just being like, this will solve our problem if we get rid of this person, and then it like escalates and it goes from person to person, and at the end it's like the real monster was that we kind of screwed up this whole time.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's one of those things. It's very common in like horror movies that are like adapted from plays.
Oh yeah.
Something that ultimately it's just, well, all of these people are going to be awful to each other. Again, much like Stephen King's The Mist. Anyway, so SpongeBob does not freeze to death in the freezer. He's actually having a pretty good time in there. He's like going down ski slopes. And Patrick starts to get jealous. So he, in order to get thrown in there as well, puts like green sauce all over his face.
Where do they get this stuff?
I don't know.
Is this the like the fabled like green slime from the walls of the Krusty Krab?
No, because when he goes up, it's very careful to show you that he has a bunch of like sauce packets of some kind in his hand behind his back. So one assumes that like maybe he's really committed to the bit and like a fucking the Krusty Krab offers like wasabi as like a dip.
They could at least like make like a relish pun so that it like reads as like something, because like why would it just be a green do they have like just like it's ectoplasm sauce from the dimension of Pigilan?
It's the Ghostbusters tie-in sauce.
Oh my god,
Delicioso. Blech.
how profitable.
Anyway, so they throw Patrick in the freezer, and basically, one by one, everyone gets thrown into this fucking freezer until only Mr. Krabs, who at this point has basically gone mad, is like outside. And they all realize, wait, we're all okay in here. So it must be that Krabs is sick. We
Krabs is
need
the
to like
sicko.
get out of here and attend to this.
Mr. Krabs is the sicko.
So that they get out, and Mr. Krabs, who has fully gone mad, right? He's like got a beard and he's like, "Oh, I'm not letting you sickos touch me." and they all start having this like big like fight where they're all like battling, and Pearl is like, please dad, like see reason, like you're scaring me. Again, it's weird. It's if
Yeah.
this exact concept was presented in like a little bit more of like a serious way, this would have like real lost episode potential.
No, exactly. Because, like, I'm imagining, like, there's a version of this where it's like, they have like a big wide shot as there's like uncomfortable violence as they're trying to wrestle Mr. Krabs into the theater. Sorry, the theater. The vault, the freezer.
Freezer.
Freezer, yeah. Oh my god.
Yes,
The
that's the
theater.
word.
I was just imagining this as a play, I guess. Like, you know,
Yeah, it's getting very like Brechtian. They like wrestle him fully out of the building, and the audience has to just follow. It's really immersive, very avant-garde.
absolutely. You drink enough fizz bomb and volcanic hot sauce, and you go to the theater, and every play turns into Mr. Krabs' incarceration,
Quarantined Crabs by Samuel Beckett.
waiting for Krabs.
This whole like battle happens, and over the course of the battle, they're all like covered in filth. I could break it down beat by beat, but like it's just a cacophony of stuff. And basically, the next day, the health inspector comes back and he unlocks the thing and is like, hey guys, sorry, funny story. Turns out that I had my sensor around the wrong way before. So, this was all just a misunderstanding. You guys are totally fine. No response. The Krusty Krab is trashed and dark. And he pulls out a flashlight, and the illumination of the flashlight brings us around. Again, it's very horror framing. Um, brings us to Squidward, whose legs are like deformed and covered in pustules because earlier he had to go into the grease trap to try and get Mr. Krabs out, and the
Oh
health
my
inspector is like,
god.
grease gout, and then to like SpongeBob, and he's like looking weird and fucked up and kind of melted, and then to Mrs. Puff, and she's looking weird and fucked up and like weird and deformed, and same for Pearl. And then finally, Mr. Krabs is up in like the rafters, looking down, looking all weird and fucked up. And the health inspector runs out screaming and is like, we need to do a mega quarantine. And basically, an entire box is built around the Krusty Krab. The box is picked up by a helicopter. It's taken across the street and dropped onto the chum bucket. And you hear Plankton screaming, like, no, no, I don't want to get infected. As you just hear the like various infected characters from the Krusty Krabs like getting him, and the episode ends there.
Oh my god. Yeah, no wonder that they were like that's very alarmist, honestly, in the context of like there's a pandemic.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like, we maybe like like kids who are having to hear a lot of words, like quarantine and things like that. They probably shouldn't see this at the moment.
I know we like riff a lot about how like, weird and crazy the characters are compared to their old characterizations, but I think you were spot on when you said this one feels like a lost episode because it's so bleak and the subject matter is so specific. And like from what you described, the pacing of it, of like people getting locked in the freezer and like the original guy, going mad because this is what they did in the Navy days, but there was like a dark secret to that. Like it's all very like singularly strange and out of character for the show.
I wonder if the writer of this episode, I wonder if their babysitter farted on them if they were a child.
Oh,
Makes you think,
it's really the if this is what it leads to, you know what? I'm going to stop right there because I can't like
Yep.
when it comes to my own past, I don't feel
I think we're
comfortable.
getting into indefensible
Yeah,
territory here.
it's not. Oh boy. Let's just move on So,
Which brings us to our last episode.
Henry,
What is it called, Gus?
are you ready for the Seaman Sponge Haters Club?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The Seaman Sponge Haters Club.
I find the emphasis you're putting on the first two words really interesting.
What do you mean, the Seaman Sponge Haters Club?
Yeah, the Seaman Sponge Haters Club.
The Seaman Haters Club.
What's weird about that?
Seaman Club. Seaman.
Look, sometimes to get me going, I just need to shove a Pigilan up my. No. All right, what's next? Go on, tell us before we say something else weird.
Exactly. So, this episode, the Seaman Sponge Haters Club, is this not. Are we not just this?
Well, I think we're due for another rebrand. We're gonna take it from We Are Not Alive to the Seaman Sponge Haters Club.
Yeah, and then someday we'll be Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Lonely Hearts Club's Sponge.
Lonely Farts Club Band. Anyway, so this episode begins with SpongeBob taking out a big stinky trash bag out of his house. Just a big, like,
I thought you were gonna say taking a big stinky dump.
I mean, with the goops and oozes and browns that this trash bag is slopping about, it's not that much as not as worse as that. Are you the girl of the love? Losing my.
Yes, I am a girl.
I'm losing my goose over here.
I'm losing myself.
In you. So SpongeBob is taking this trash out, and this is like a weird, overly long gag that has nothing to do with the beginning of the episode or the rest of the episode. Because SpongeBob's just like, "Don't
Another
worry,
classic.
don't worry, Trashy. We've had some good times, but you're gonna make all sorts of nice friends at the dump." And the trash like spews horrible, disgusting refuse on him, and he goes, "I know, I know," and he puts the trash into the trash bin, into the like the outside like steel can, and he squishes it down, and he's about to walk back into his house when he sees a number of people heading over into Squidward's house. There's Mrs. Puff and Plankton and Bubble Bass and a random mailman who I believe is like consistent with a lot of the mailmen we see on this street in SpongeBob.
Yeah, mailmen often get terrorized in this show. Because that's to appeal to the like dog portion of the audience.
Like, I guess, you know? They've had it too good for too long, the mailmen.
You gotta get them before they get you.
But anyway, SpongeBob like looks up over at them and he goes like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And they all go, "We're not here." And SpongeBob rubs his eyes and he's like, "I really need glasses." And he walks back into his house. This collection of characters heads into Squidward's house, and Squidward, with a gavel, calls to order the like 400 and something meeting of the SpongeBob Haters Club.
I love that like this weird kind of like SpongeBob like targeted individual thing is a recurring like thing in this show. And do you remember that really just menacing like speaking of episodes that have a fucking lost episode energy? Do you remember Gone?
Gone? Henry.
Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember Gone. What is Gone?
Real quick, because even the title card of this will spook you. Google SpongeBob episode Gone. Gone.
Oh my.
Do
Wait, this is the episode where Bikini Bottom is empty.
Yeah, he wakes up one morning, and again, that title card, I find that really spooky
No,
for
yeah,
some reason.
genuinely.
But yeah, he wakes up and everyone in Bikini Bottom is gone, as the title suggests. And over the course of the episode, he slowly goes mad. He gets a little bit kind of like Will Smith in I Am Legend, like acts out other people's roles to make himself less lonely, and starts to get paranoid when this like puppet of Patrick that he's like made out of like patty meat and operates with his hand starts like saying like, oh, people are plotting against you. um and then at the end of the episode, after all of this like weirdness and like tension, everyone turns back up and reveals that once a year they have a thing where everyone leaves town together to get away from SpongeBob, and they build a giant effigy of him and burn it down and spend the weekend dancing on the ashes before they come back.
That that is absolutely insane. And guess what? This episode cannot possibly top that because what we're looking at here is not a like, sort of creepy like SpongeBob is the victim of some kind of strange reverse gang stalking situation in a conspiracy. What we have here is kind of like the worst written version of Almost Got Him or The Princess and the Bounty Hunters.
I've got to say, these episodes, we have an interesting history with them. I'm not going to say any names,
Yeah,
but I think for some reason I can't quite put my finger on. I have a bit of a like kind of instinctual knee jerk dislike of episodes like this. How do you feel about that, Gus?
I personally think that the originals of these are a classic, but they could very easily be done wrong if not handled by the deft hands of like the people behind Batman the Animated Series or Samurai Jack. Maybe we're instead a vehicle for a character.
The person we're vaguing will never see this,
No.
so I think it's all good. But yeah, no, that's just feel free to speculate on that in the comments. Anyway, so tell me more, Gus.
Yeah, so anyway, this incredibly original concept that could not be messed up, but is in this episode, um is yeah, so everyone's telling their own SpongeBob stories about like times that SpongeBob like, ruined their lives, ruined their days. Miss Puff begins with like this tale of she had just passed somebody at the driving school, and as she's handing over the license and she's like, "Oh, I'm so happy." SpongeBob shows up with like a very creepy look on his face. Like I can best describe this initial face as like, that weird Woody doll from Japan?
That's like grinning in a weirdly perverse way.
Yeah, the like hentai Woody.
Kind of like,
Yeah,
"Mm,"
that.
like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, he's been used in like a lot of memes over the years.
So SpongeBob is like, "Hey, nice license. Can I touch it?" And he like takes this like student who like is young enough to be like voiced by a child and like just grabs the license and like starts rubbing it on himself.
I he's Well, what does he appear to get out of rubbing this on himself?
I mean, he's like kind of like shuddering a bit and like his eyes kind of like point upward and he's like,
What is it with all these fucking episodes feeling like I know they're all like cursed, but like they're a different kind of cursed
No,
today,
the thing,
in my opinion.
here's the thing, this collection of episodes is so funny because like what it feels like is that like everybody else is out of the room, right? It's just you and me. um like Meg's not here, Zooey's not here, Addison's not here. It's just you and me, and the show is like, hey, it's only the original SpongeBob boys. I don't even have to try. I don't even have to be anything else but what you know me to be, and what everyone in the comments will deny that it is. But this is it, man. It's a filthy, perverted, gross, creepy, and if you can't see it, there's no saving you from what's coming.
SpongeBob is like, "Hey boys, I've been brewing this one up for you real special." Turns round, unleashes a horrific fart onto both of us. And then is like, "You know what I got out of that? Doing that to you. Try to convince them." And then walks away, hobbling slightly.
I've heard that farts scientifically are more powerful when they're square, and even more powerful when they're cubed. Anyway, SpongeBob does this and it unnerves this new student so much that she grabs her license
Unnerves me as well.
and runs out of the car. And then Mrs. Puff's like, I tried to get away, but there's no escaping SpongeBob. And SpongeBob morphs into, and you've seen the screenshot, Henry, he becomes like Ratfink, like the Hot Rod
Ratfink.
character.
Yeah.
Like, it's a direct reference.
No, he is completely and utterly Ratfink. Like, even the pose that he is in is the famous pose of Ratfink on his, like, hot rod.
I don't know if we've ever mentioned this on the show, but like I feel like it's a good time to bring it up. There was like a project I was working on a while back, and it's gone through several permutations, but the initial draft um was like not the tone that I wanted it to be. Like I wanted it to be a little bit more wacky, a little bit more strange, because it was meant for animation. And Henry, your advice to me, which I took to heart, was this needs to feel how Ratfink looks.
And there are some things that I think do require what we have. Oh, Buffy's
Oh,
not
the
here, by
beef!
the way. She is.
Here's the beef!
She got a taste of fame in the Liminal Spaces episode. Now she's like, I want the SpongeBob Boys audience to be exposed to me as well.
SpongeBob beef! SpongeBob beef! Beef boys! Beef
What do you
up
think, Buffy?
boys!
Yeah, she's just barking in the background. Yeah, there she is. But anyway, so that also flashbanged me. What was happening? SpongeBob. Let's get back into the episode.
Right. So SpongeBob turns
Ratfink.
He turns into Ratfink, and he demolishes Mrs. Puff's boating school always, forever. And she says like he did it again this week. And one thing I'm sorry, I just hear Buffy going off in the background.
Meg's trying to lure her back downstairs with deli meats.
Buffy
She's
really
like, no, I'm staying up here now.
Buffy really wants to be in the video, you guys.
She's come back to me. I have nothing to offer you, Buffy. I'm gonna take a picture right now, and I'm gonna send this to you, Gus, so you can see what I'm seeing, and so this can be on the screen. Here she is, like just looking into the booth for the audience to see.
What? Buffy! Buffy!
Look at her.
If you want to be on the show, you have to watch an episode, Buffy. You have to take notes.
Look at how she impassively stares beyond the booth.
It seems we have reached an impasse.
I guess, oh, she's gone now. I guess she's gonna miss the panty ring. And we all will, now that that's been...
It's gone.
Much like that other episode, it's gone.
Gone. So, Mrs. Puff is comforted by Squidward, who puts like a blanket around her and goes, yes, we've all suffered at the hands of SpongeBob. Who among us wishes to speak next? And one of the details about this is that they get like speaking sponges, which are like little kitchen sponges that are like yellow, the same color as SpongeBob, and they like tear them up at the end of their stories each time.
It's always, again, this weird recurring theme of they have effigies of him.
Yeah.
Which they have to symbolically and ritualistically destroy.
Sponge God sacrilege pants.
Yeah.
So Bubble Bass goes next. And before I describe to you what Bubble Bass's story is, Henry, we're far enough into the video now that this question can be meaningful to the audience. What would you say is the original essence of Bubble Bass the character?
Well, here's the thing. We've had this discussion in other episodes. Bubble Bass is, for lack of a better term, a male Karen. He's an unreasonable customer who makes his pickiness the problem of service staff and demands to be catered to an unreasonable degree. That was the source of his character. And also a kleptomaniac, apparently.
Yeah. And like that is the conflict that forms in that first episode with him. And you would think that even despite the new stuff they piled onto him being like, a shitheel internet reviewer, him being obsessed with collectibles and comic books, him calling every new thing woke,
him having a gas problem,
him accepting money from right-wing media conglomerates,
Joining the Daily Wire, having a small cameo in Lady Ballers.
Yeah, calling that movie a rough gem because hey, you gotta get the money. Who needs integrity when you've got money? Creating a strong female character that you disavow, but not in person.
Once guest starring as a small role in an episode of Limmy's show.
There's so much. Listen, we could go on forever. Bubble Bass, who we are talking about, is a complex
Are
individual.
we?
Bubble Bass is a complex character with a long history of breaking little hearts like the one in me. So
Of ripping little farts like the one.
I'm gonna choke on my own saliva and die, and it'll be your fault. It'll be your fault, Henry Galley.
This video's gotta end somehow.
So you would think that, like, despite all that, despite all his rage, I can't keep making song references. Bubble Bass is still at his heart that picky, like, unreasonable customer. You would think that, right?
Hmm.
What if I told you that Bubble Bass's segment was that Bubble Bass is not able to eat his food at the Krusty Krab because SpongeBob is too much of a perfectionist to let any, like, single fry or Krabby Patty or sip of soda pass into Bubble Bass's gawping idiot mouth.
Oh, okay. So I now 100% see why you were emphasizing that. Because that is not just mischaracterization, that is like legitimate opposite characterization.
Yeah, it is the polar opposite of, like, who Bubble Bass fundamentally is as a character. Like, and it's like, if SpongeBob is that much of a, like, if I can just soapbox for a moment here, Bubble Bass, you did this to food. You made this your life.
You can't unring that bell, Bubble Bass.
You cannot unring that bell. As Jesse Eisenberg said in cinematic masterpiece Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of the Gods of the Justice, Rebel Moon Forever, Utopia, Cross Utopia Chaos, number 39. This is the consequences of your actions. The paradigm that your actions created led to this, Bubble Bass. You are the architect of your own destruction, and you're the reason why you have to chase SpongeBob around for a Krabby Patty and sit on his face and leave a pair of ass cheek plants in his face.
Has that joke been done with it? Yeah, that happened with that, like, the wax Squidward.
Yes, it did. But hey, it's not over. The segment's not over, by the way, because uh, B- Bubble Bass, Bubble Bass eats SpongeBob alive.
What?
He picks up SpongeBob off the ground, and, like, SpongeBob's holding a Krabby Patty, and Bubble Bass downs him with the Krabby Patty, and he goes, a little on the spongy side, but it tastes pretty good. And then he starts a getting queasy, and his tummy starts rumbling because he just ate a man.
Because he just committed war.
He committed war crime, and his belly's rumbling, and he's like, "Ooh, that fry cook is giving me indigestion." As
He knows!
his belly quivers. Yeah, he's aware that he's eaten SpongeBob, but it doesn't distress him until uh, again, big wavy lines, big silhouette on the stomach. SpongeBob begins to emerge from his belly button, much like Rory Kinnear's men. Not Rory Kinnear's men.
I
Rory
hate
Kinnear
Alex.
in men. Alex Garland's men.
Rory Kinnear. Well, let's be honest, it was really Rory Kinnear's men. I think Alex Garland's contribution simply does not stack up to the monumental task of having to play every man in the world, apart from the abusive ex-husband.
The only way that that movie could have been better is if the woman who comes to the house named Rose was also played by Rory Kinnear, and the other man in the movie who
Rosary
isn't Rory
Kinnear.
Kinnear is Rory Kinnear. Um, but yeah, so much like the horrifying Attack on Titans inspired final scene, I'm not joking, of Alex Garland's Men, SpongeBob is SpongeBob is reborn out of his belly button. He slides out of there, and Bubble Bass is like feeling like very nonplussed about this, and SpongeBob has the Krabby Patty, and he's like, "Oh, thank goodness!" And then he reaches into Bubble Bass and
Huh?
pulls out his own hat of the belly button, and he rises up and he looks at Bubble Bass dead in the eyes, and he says, "I forgot my hat."
He reaches into Bubble Bass.
It that's what happened. Were you not paying attention to what I just said? It's what happened, and he forgot his hat, and he gets his hat, and Bubble Bass runs out of the restaurant screaming. And we cut back to the support group, and Bubble Bass says, "He left my navel in knots." And we get a close up on his post
Oh
belly
god.
birth navel twisted around. It's all extremely uncomfortable, and stop pretending. Stop pretending that our take on this show is controversial.
It's a weird show. It's a weird, weird
It's
show.
a weird, perverse show, and it's time for Plankton's story. So shit down. Shit down. Shit your asses down.
Oh, I'm shitting.
Plankton says he's suffered worse. He's suffered hard times worse than getting SpongeBob birthed out of his belly. And we go to him at the chum bucket. And in another clever reference to the events of 2020, he has a stick of dynamite through a roll of toilet paper. And he says, "I'm gonna wipe Bikini Bottom off the map."
Oh, it's not even like it's not even any pretense if I want the formula now. It's just I'm gonna genocide this town.
Right? Like, this is such an out of character episode. It is crazy to me that like Plankton is just like, "I'm gonna murder people. That's what I love to do. I'm
I'm gonna kill everybody here.
Nobody comes to my restaurant. Well, then they'll be dead, and then they'll come to my restaurant
Yeah, then they'll take me seriously because they'll be dead
because they'll be dead, and they'll be at my restaurant eating their food
in hell.
in hell." So, so Plankton is doing his evil laugh, and then SpongeBob starts to laugh like in the background, and he's like, "Oh, I can never do a good evil laugh." And he tries to do it again, and there's more SpongeBob laughter. And then it's revealed that SpongeBob was like hiding in the machinery of the chum bucket, and he's flapping around like a chicken. Um like very specifically that like SpongeBob acting like a chicken meme. You know the one. Like he's got that same facial
Yeah, yeah,
expression.
the one that is used for like when you're like doing like a stupid mocking version of someone saying something. Ooh.
Yeah, so SpongeBob is doing that obviously because like that's, become big again. And so he starts flying around and Plankton's like, "Karen, get him out of here." And then SpongeBob goes inside Karen's like big computer self and she goes, "Oh, he's in my mainframe, you dirty bird." And
You rascal.
you rascal. It, and anyway, Karen's like small computer body and Plankton chase SpongeBob out of the chum bucket. They get locked in, I think, or they get locked out. Yeah, they get locked out of the chum bucket. And Plankton's like, he's like, "Yeah. So if you ever hear that SpongeBob, don't get involved." And I'm like, I'm not sure what he's referencing.
I also love the idea of everyone else being like, yeah, SpongeBob should have let you wipe out this town.
Yeah, no.
Dick.
Why are they hanging out with him? Why are they hanging out with him? So the mailman who has been here the whole time, he doesn't have a story because they realized like, okay, we've got like just enough time for Squidward's tale. And Squidward's tale is, funnily enough, this feels like Squidward's characterization has advanced a little bit based on some of the SpongeBob episodes we've seen with him, because at this point he understands the rules of the funny games. Maybe he's even playing a little bit. Squidward says, "I am now going to tell my SpongeBob tale in real time." And there is a knock on the door, and it's SpongeBob.
Oh no.
And Squidward walks over to the door and opens it, and he says, But there was no one there because SpongeBob was already inside the house. And SpongeBob appears, and for a moment, the background does like a negative inversion of itself, like someone stopped time in the JoJo dimension. And SpongeBob is standing there with like this cup in his hand, and he goes, "Hey Squidward, can I borrow a cup of salt water?" And Squidward takes his cup and swishes it through the air, the water, and just hands it back
Pretty
to
good
him.
joke.
Yeah, yeah, no, I thought that was pretty clever. And then Squidward begins to tell everybody, like, and then SpongeBob will enter the house without permission and he will begin to annoy everybody. And he starts annoying everybody, like, running up to them, like, making, like, like, oh, hey, Mrs. Puff, good to see you. Hey, Bubble Bass, you been pumping iron? You been working out? Like, and so he's, like, walking around and he's doing all this stuff. And then Squidward says, and wherever he goes, his pointy pink pal is not far behind. And Squidward is in the background drinking like the punch bowl that was there for like the support group. And he like turns to the camera and Patrick has like eaten the ladle for like serving. So it's like in his mouth, like sideways. He's like, oh, we're out of punch. And SpongeBob,
Hell yeah, Patrick, you go.
you live your life. And you live your life the best
Just
way you
live your
can.
life. Eh.
And so SpongeBob he says, "Don't worry, Squidward, I'll go get some more pineapple punch from my house. It's homemade." And we see a shot of the pineapple. And then it cuts back to SpongeBob and he says, ha, as in it's made from the walls of my home. And he smiles and the
What?
camera pauses.
Asbestos.
As best as I can.
Yeah, I made this as best as I can.
So SpongeBob gets the punch, and Squidward says, and no SpongeBob story would be complete without SpongeBob destroying something. Because Squidward is just aware of what the show's become. And SpongeBob re enters with the punch bowl, and he trips over, I think he trips over Patrick, but he trips somehow, and he flings the punch onto the air conditioner, which was planted earlier in a one off gag of the air conditioner sounding like SpongeBob's laughter and them turning it down. Um, the air conditioner bursts into flames after getting doused with pineapple punch, and then the house
Naturally.
itself lights on fire. We cut to like firefighters putting out the thing, and Mrs. Puff is like, "Well, where do we host our meeting now?" And SpongeBob's like, "I got just the place." And so they all go to SpongeBob's house, and SpongeBob himself volunteers to be the talking sponge so that they can like manhandle him while they're telling their stories.
Weird. This is weird. Again, I feel like a broken record here, but like, this is weird, right? Like, I'm not.
No, well, that's the thing. It's like I don't get this. I don't think they're not
Are we
trying.
living into just SpongeBob's like degradation and humiliation fetish now?
I guess, but he never seems humiliated, right? It seems like if something bad happens to him, it almost shames the other person. Like he's topping from the bottom in a way. I don't know how to explain it. So like SpongeBob is being like, held and like twisted by the mailman who is like, and I was barfing up his mail for weeks. And then he starts like mail starts just shooting out of his mouth. He's like, "Garr!" And we just see the support group is like all there, the Sponge Haters Club, which SpongeBob is now a part of, I guess, and Patrick's there too. And for some reason, we go from that to outside SpongeBob's pineapple over to Squidward, who is sitting in like the burned out ruins of his house. It's been destroyed 2 episodes in a row, like in both of mine. And he says, "I hereby call this meeting adjourned," and he hits himself in the head with his mallet, and he dies. That's the end of the show.
Just loves pain.
Yeah, that's he loves.
I,
I am pain. Hellraiser Squidward. I'm sorry.
so that right there was another episode of SpongeBob boys with the OG crew. I feel like I'm not alone in like we were kind of observing earlier that like this one feels like kind of particularly like weird and uncomfortable. I'm not
Yeah.
alone in that, right?
No, yeah, man, because like again, like it almost
'Cause we got
feels.
some real weird shit in this
It
episode.
feels like this episode degrades. Sorry, it feels like this show like degrades in like any semblance of even itself. The more we look at it, like it's just kind of like weird, very surface level, perverse jokes. But it's hardly even shocking anymore. It's almost like the show doesn't realize that any of this is disturbing, but it also doesn't know what else to do. Like it's not even telling jokes most of the time, just kind of
It,
stuff's
it's kind of
happening.
like it's kind of like those sort of like weird splattercore books that I feel like I've had a lot of videos made about them recently after they sort of blew up on TikTok. You know, things like Playground and stuff like that. And it's one of those things where they're all so relentless in like throwing like messed up stuff at you that at a point you become like really numb to it, you know?
No, you're right. You're right because there was a time that we were like, "Ugh, this is gross. I can't believe this." Or like, how can they have a bubble bass like fairy tale episode that's so weird? Or like, what? Like strange animals and an animal war with bubble animals. How could any of like there would be a time where we would find all of this so bizarre that like we'd have to relitigate it like almost every minute. But now it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, I mean, I'd be more surprised if it wasn't in there, really.
Yeah, it like gets very holographic meatloaf, my favorite,
Yeah, because
eventually.
I think it's the other thing is like we've been to the Patrick Star show. And so we've kind of seen like, when something goes all out into the complete gagosphere, like that's what it looks like. And then we go back to this, which I don't even know what SpongeBob is going for in general
I feel
anymore.
like we're left in a feel like we're left in a different kind of gagosphere with these other ones.
Oh, stop it, you. But like
Well,
what I am saying is that like this show is now to me more so than anything that happens in any of these episodes. It is the sheer enormity of it. It is the unfathomable amount of occurrences that are contained within the total amount of episodes. Like anything can happen, everything has happened. This is like watching entropy. This is like staring into the multiverse. The jaws of possibility are open wide, and the teeth are sharp, and the mob rays with this siren song